Hello and welcome to Anything But Ordinary with Spooky and Raven. Tonight's topic, Men in Black. I am your host, Spooky, and here is your other most awesome host, Raven.
Hey,
Hey.
we're back. That's what you normally say, but I'm going to say it for you tonight. So, tonight is freaking cold, and it's ice storming here, so hopefully we don't have any nut issues.
Yeah, it's raining here too, so hopefully
winter.
everything will go good.
Yeah, winter.
Welcome to winter, people.
Yeah. But tonight's topic was a viewer's request that we had gotten a long time ago. And, we try to get to them as best as we can, but we do write them all down. We don't forget about you guys that have contacted us. We appreciate everyone who's ever taken time to message us through the years, and just, banter with us, or even who sent us all these suggestions. We do write them down, and we are eventually going to get to all of them, but I just wanted to say thank you to the viewer who sent this request in.
Oh, absolutely. And we do try to get to them just as soon as we can. We have quite a few of them, so just bear with us. We will get to it.
Yeah, and feel free to send more if you guys, anybody who ever does,
Right, and anyone listening tonight, feel free to contact us if you have a show topic you'd like us to look into as well. Tonight's topic, most of the time when you hear Men in Black, or rather MIB for short, many people think of the movie starring Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith, but that's not the MIB we are talking about tonight.
Although that is a funny movies.
I like that. I like those movies.
Yeah. It's, but in a way, it makes you wonder, because there are people who are like all about these different conspiracy theories and stuff, and they believe that the government is actually like that movie, not the comedy of part of it, but they're actually working with aliens who have been living amongst us for eons. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? So in a way, people are like, oh, they're kind of telling the truth when they're saying that movie. That's what a lot of people do. But this topic, when I was researching it and stuff, it's like many other ones we kind of look into. It's like this huge spider web, and it leads you on so many different avenues. Because, we have, like, UFO sightings are attached with the MIB, of course. We know that. You got the abductees. You got secret bases. You got cryptids. You got into Hollow Earth. You got the Illuminati. I mean, you could just name it. It goes on a lot where these men in black and women in black seem to have ties into with a lot of things, even all the way up to the presidential stuff,
Right.
And, by the way, we're going to be doing a lot of shows on like Hollow Earth too, secret bases and cryptids and stuff. We're going to be doing shows on that stuff too. But
I was actually amazed at where this topic led, because I would have never in a million years thought this topic would have led to cryptids or to the Illuminati or even maybe Hollow Earth. Okay, but there were some things. There were some things that I found while I was researching this topic that I just could not believe. That because when you think of Men in Black, you don't normally think of cryptids and secret societies and things.
Well, you kind of. I think when it comes to Men in Black, if you think about it, it's kind of been discussed, obviously, in the UFO communities, as well as the paranormal and the cryptids, because a lot of people who are gathering information, photos, samples, and everything with that, they seem to have run-ins with these MIBs and WOBs, and nobody, as far as I know, quite knows who or what they are. And to be honest, after doing like weeks of searching into this, I kind of think they're different encounters that people are having, because I think some of them, as far as how they're explaining it, are humans. I think some might be like spiritual nature or paranormal, because some people are seeing them, they're just showing up and then they vanish. And then there's other people who are talking where it seems they're almost alien in nature, or like human hybrids, when it comes to these men in black or women in black.
Well, MIB, according to some conspiracists, is an agency that may or may not belong to the government, who supposedly visit people who have had UFO alien encounters for the sole purpose of getting these people to change their stories about what they saw through intimidation and threats.
Yeah.
Now, according to some conspiracies, these men, and there are women in black also reported, do not belong to any government agency, but are extraterrestrials or human hybrids that want to keep their agenda and presence on Earth a secret.
Mm-hmm.
Now, although no one can say for sure exactly what their agenda is, but supposedly the government formed the MIB division back in Truman's day when he declared that the American people will not be informed of the existence of ETs or UFOs for different reasoning.
Right.
Two of those reasons being that people panic and would cause chaos throughout the country, and another being the agreement that the government has with the ETs to allow them to assimilate themselves into our population, and or allowing them to abduct people for scientific study in exchange for technology. But all of this depends on which conspiracy you choose to believe.
Right. But there's always truths in everything to a degree. You know what I mean? But
oh yeah, you keep digging long enough, I mean, you're going to find the truth somewhere. Every conspiracy, in my opinion, does have a little grain of truth to it.
oh yeah, totally. But do you recall that one show that we did when we discussed, I think it was called like UFOs, aliens, and strange otherworldly encounters throughout history? Do you remember that one that we did years ago?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Well, it was during that show, because you were talking about Truman, but do you remember during that show we did talk about at one point about Truman and the other presidents and the government connections when it came to a lot of this strange stuff? But it was back in the mid 40s that the Majestic 12, the MJ-12, was formed, which was basically made up of like a variety of military leaders. You got the government officials and different scientists, and it was created by Truman for the purpose to, this is what they say, to investigate the Roswell incident and other UFO happenings, with kind of like what you're talking about, supposedly. And there are many who think that the MJ-12s are actually tied in with the Men in Black and the Women in Black encounters.
Right. They, as you go along and you listen to all these different conspiracies, and you don't really know which one is the truth, but eventually, as like I said before, you start researching this, and for some reason, all of this will it seems to tie in together.
Well, but you were talking about Truman creating, what was it? He had created those different groups anyway, but they also had the Majestic 12,
well,
MJ-12s.
Truman was the one that supposedly had an encounter with extraterrestrials.
Well, it was during the 50s. They had that huge rash of the UFOs that were being spotted in Canada
exactly.
and all over the United States. They were even buzzing the White House.
Exactly, and he was the one that declared that the American people were not to be told that extraterrestrials exist. And I think it was Eisenhower, I could be wrong, I'd have to look that up again, is the one that created Area 51.
Right.
And he created Area 51 for the same reason. Supposedly he had an encounter with extraterrestrials.
Right. I'm sorry if my heater's kind of loud, but it's cold here. It's like down in the 20s and stuff. But
it snowed up there too, didn't it?
Yeah. With the UFO history one that we had done, because we did a lot of research showing official documents and everything else that were now released to the public and stuff. But I'm going to end up tagging that show to this one in our references down below after the show's ended, when I rechanged the wording. But, I mean, there was a lot of writings we did from the beginning, as far back, like, as before biblical time, all the way up to that date and time when we did the show. And there is, like, a ton of info in there. So anybody who's into this type of stuff, UFOs, aliens, abductees, Men in Black, all that stuff, there's tons in there that we did, too. But, sightings and reports of Men in Black and Women in Black, they go back for years, is what I'm looking at.
Oh, yeah.
But most of it, from what people who tend to talk about it say, well, it kind of started in the 50s, while there's others who make statements or claims that similar type of encounters go as far back as the biblical times when it comes with this stuff.
Well, no one knows for sure when these MIBs first appeared.
Right.
Some trace them, like I said before, some trace them back to our 33rd president, Harry S. Truman. Mm-hmm. Now, if we go on that timeline, then we are talking from 1945 to 1953. Now, you have those that say they came about during World War II because Hitler firmly believed in ETs and UFOs and was experimenting with an alien spaceship that crashed in Germany, although there is no proof of that we know of.
Oh, we're going to be doing shows
but
on that
we
stuff too.
True, but we do know though that he was experimenting with different types of airships and planes.
Yeah.
So now we're talking 1939 to 1945. And like you said before, there are those that say the MIB appeared long before this.
True. Well, when I like I told you, when I was kind of surfing the net, kind of digging about on these encounters and such, it's when I came to these, I guess, men in black. I think I might just shorten and say MIBs and WBs because everybody knows what we're talking about on these few sites. One couple of sites were kind of talking about these strange lights that appeared for years in this one area, and it occurred in like 1904 to 1905, and it was in the North Wales, in this Welsh village. I can't think of the name. Egrin or something like that. I think Egrin, yeah.
I think is the name of it.
Right. And I was, because when we do this stuff, we try our best to take all sides of the subject to bring it out for everybody so they can make their own decision and decide if they want to believe in this or not believe in it. We're not here to push one way or the other. But when I was digging way back, this one kind of seemed like it falled into this. And what happened was, I'm going to kind of give a brief summarization of this one because we could do a whole show just on this one thing that I discovered, because this was going on for years here, but these strange things were occurring to people where it first started out where they were seeing kind of like this thing that looked like a large aura type arc light that was coming from the mountains, and it stretched way across the land into the ocean. And then after they were starting to see that for a few nights, that's when they claimed that everything started to get weird, and these people were seeing like these strange things, from bizarre lights, streaking straight up from the ground, these things like fireballs showing up to strange shape like crafts following people around or just hovering in certain areas. But there's this one woman, her name was Mary Jones, who was this preacher, and during her what do you call it when they have all those huge get-togethers? Revivals, yeah. She was having a few revivals in this chapel, and that's when many claimed to experience some of these strange objects in the sky. And it happened so much that it caught the attention of newspaper journalists as far away as London and other cities. So they started arriving there, and that, they made the trip out there to, kind of debunk or just say, yeah, this isn't really happening. But according to their articles, because you can go and read these articles online, because now that a lot of newspapers have gone back as far as the stuff that they had kept is online now, where you can go back and read old articles, you know what I mean? But
right.
They went out there, they saw this stuff happening, so they started writing these articles claiming to see these strange lights outside the chapel all around in the sky. This one man who was like a farmer, he claimed he saw like these 3 lights in a formation. Others claimed that they saw like just this huge large light just south of the chapel, and in this large light was this dark person seen in the middle, like MIB, Men in Black, and with lots of little lights all around it. And the light in the middle had like a ray of different colors and stuff. And some say that they saw like a bottle shape as well. I mean, there's so much when it comes to this. I'm going to put the link in our references later so you guys can read it, because like I said, this topic alone would take 2 hours to tell the whole story with this one. But so there were all these different months through 1994 to 1996. They were seeing all these different bizarre lights, these UFO type of crafts, these people showing up in the middle of these strange lights with a way of kind of like they're in a bubble, you know what I mean, just floating around inside of it. Now some say when they say like bottle shape, I'm thinking they're trying to explain like a spacecraft shape. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well,
but there was other occasions.
A lot of people, they just describe them as objects that they knew of.
Yeah, which a lot of people did because you didn't have like crafts back then in 1900s.
Right.
But there was other occasions when these strange lights were about, and there was this one article that it came about I found. I sound like I'm from Canada. I'm not. I change my accent all the time. I don't know why. But there was this one article that came out in the spring of 1905, and it said that a man in black had appeared for like 3 nights in a row, and they were conversing with this young female in the area. And I don't know if that was like supernatural, or
Yeah.
or whatnot. But anyway, he was coming there kind of talking to her, and he told her that why the things that were occurring, and then told her that she couldn't talk about anything and just, kind of silence her, which has a lot to do with the Men in Black stuff. And this is in an article back in 1905. Now, were all these lights and all the things that they were experiencing, was it supernatural? Was it, some earthly phenomenon? Was it alien in nature? I mean, I don't know, because there was so much going on that everybody was seeing. Now, many have their theories that these events, each varying in different opinions, of course, but I'm going to post like a link which pretty much covers everybody's single account, because they documented everything they saw on what date, what time, the year, the month, everything. And I'm going to post that so you guys can go read about it. There's also the newspaper articles there that you guys can read about it too. But as far as, us trying to find the earliest history, I thought this one fell in line because there's 2 different incidences where they were talking about seeing a person dressed in all black. And I thought that it fit very well when it came to this, And
Right.
there's several different occasions that, people took to writing this down, and journalists kept writing it for years too. So, and I think they said that they still have strange lights occurring in that same town area to this day too.
Well, no matter when they first appeared, though, I mean, stories and reports of MIBs are still reported to this day.
True. I mean, I don't know what they are, because it varies, it seems, in many of the encounters as far as, it looks like to me anyway.
Well, true. People who have encountered these MIBs, they've described them in various ways. Some say that they have olive complexions with Asian-like features. Some say that they are tan. Others say that they are pale. Their complexion is pale, and they described it as a death pale. They have no eyebrows or eyelashes. They have very long slanted eyes that were either jet black or they glowed, and they had thin lips.
People did talk about them having like black eyes, like, black-eyed children type of eyes.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I remember reading a lot about that too.
Some said that they had these really thin lips that looked more like slits than lips.
Yeah.
And many say they looked as if they were wearing really bright red lipstick.
Right. Well, as far as the stature goes, it seems like it ranges a little bit in height, but more often, when I was reading, when they come in pairs or threes, they all seem to be about the same height and built.
Oh, yeah. And they are always said to be dressed in black suits, ties, and shoes, and that their garments always seem to be like a tad outdated and made from an unknown material. And they are often seen wearing these dark hats and sunglasses. And some say they wear the sunglasses to hide their glowing eyes.
Yeah, I was thinking of a couple different movies that flashed in my head that have to do with the alien stuff. But remember Roddy Piper? He did that alien show where he put the sunglasses on and then could tell who was the alien. And then it made me think of like other different alien things where, they showed the Men in Black and stuff, and that they were more alien in nature, and that they had to cover up the differences that they did have so people wouldn't tell it was them. But
right.
They also talk about they always arrive or show up to these witnesses in the same way. They're always in some type of black transportation mode too, though.
Oh yeah, there are reports of them in older Cadillacs and Buicks of the 30s and 50s era, but the cars are in pristine condition as though they had just rolled out of the factory off the assembly line, and their cars even had that new car smell.
Yeah, just like they were made right then and there. But there's people out there who said that they have seen also large black SUVs, they've seen vans, or some people who claim, remember that black helicopter stuff that's been happening?
Oh, yeah.
They claim that the black helicopters have to do with the MIB, and it's their new way of harassing those who are trying to share the truths about all these different things that they don't want coming out that have to do with aliens, UFOs, cryptids, the government, all that kind of stuff. And they're using these helicopters now to harass and terrorize those to be silent.
Yeah, and some of these people that have seen or been harassed by these MIBs actually wrote down the license plate numbers, and when they ran a check on them, they found out that the plates were never issued.
Oh, yeah. And it belongs like in a totally different state or across the country. You know, there was this one I was reading about where this police officer actually, he had a couple run-ins with these men in black. They were kind of harassing him over some stuff that he was dealing with. And he actually called in the plate, and it belonged to some National Park Service. And the guy picked up the phone, and he's like, yeah, do you have, you know, this VIN number and this vehicle? And the guy's like, yeah, I'm looking outside at looking out the window right now at it. And he's like, okay, that's strange. How can a vehicle that was just in front of this guy with these men in black, be registered to another vehicle all across, straight across the country in a National Park Service, and the guy's looking right at it,
Yeah. There are reports of them. There have been reports of them. Practically all of them. I'm getting tongue-tied here. Excuse me. Typically.
They talk about them. Coming around.
Always coming in groups of 3, and their mannerism and speech seems to almost be mechanical in nature, that their speech seems lifeless and very monotone, with no accent in their sentence construction.
Yeah.
And their choice of words seem to be very, very strange. And also they have been reported to have like respiratory problems, and they tend to run out of energy very quickly.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. For some reason I got tongue-tied.
Yeah, you're thinking about different stuff, but
I know I got a couple thoughts running through my head, and they were trying to come out at the same time.
I read all that stuff too on the different sites about their odd speech, because it's as though they didn't. What it seems like, the way when people are having these encounters with these men in black and the women in black, it's almost like they don't know how to act as a human naturally. It's almost like they have to question what they're stating to the person. Like, did how I say this, is it okay? Or is this how you normally act as a human? Like they were doing some type of action while they were there. Is this the way I'm supposed to put my hand out? Or is this how I'm supposed to sit? Just they act bizarre, as though they don't even know how to work that body,
Right.
And some spoke of these guys, actually their face looking plastic of sorts. They said it was like so smooth without any flaws or lines. And they say it's almost looked like it's an image projected over something to make it seem or look humanish, but they don't. Remember I told you about my black-eyed person experience? It wasn't a kid, the black-eyed kids. I saw an adult. But remember, some of this stuff kind of matches with how her features were, how she had black eyes, and how I remember I told you she had monotoned, and she just seemed out of place. And her clothing was out of place. When I was researching this, it made me think back to that. What if the black-eyed people have something to do with all of this stuff and alien stuff? I don't know what they were or who this person was when I ran into him, but it made me start thinking of that experience again when I was researching all this.
There seems to be quite a few similarities. It's also been said that they usually visit recent UFO witnesses to warn them not to report their encounters. And they will briefly show an official-looking badge claiming to be from some government agency that they're not really exact about. It's kind of like...
they're like, oh, we're with the government, and then you're
like,
well, which government?
Like that covers every department.
Which government? Our country?
Another which country?
Government? Underground?
Whose government and which department of the government are you from?
Yeah, but
they're very vague about it. That was the word I was trying to find.
Right.
They're always very vague about what government they're with or what government department they're with.
Right. I mean, because there's even times that they don't show no badge at all. I mean, because you have the reports of these men showing up at the door of those who have actually kind of reached out to the well-known groups or persons who are dealing with these top levels of UFO communities and everything like that. And then these men in black or the women in black, they'll arrive at their doorstep claiming that they know this certain person or this group and that they were told by those people to kind of come and see them and to have, to have this talk with them about their evidence or their encounters, which turns out these men in black or women in black were never in contact with these said people, nor were they sent by them. And it seems that these men in black or whatever, they seem to have knowledge of these events and information shared privately between people when they shouldn't at all. There's no way they should even know anything, because sometimes the stuff that they're talking about was never even shared by the witness. They never told anybody, and then these people come and they somehow have this knowledge of it. How does that happen?
I don't know. One of the things, though, that I did find very interesting is that many people who did come in contact with these MIBs had often had strong feelings of being sick, and a lot of times it lasted for several days.
Yeah, that's right. I often wondered if some of these witnesses ended up with like cancer or some other serious health issue, or it possibly even died afterwards because of the health complaints that they were having. I'll have to do a little bit deeper look into that, I guess, on my own, because I think what you and I should do now, because we're already like at 8:26, is kind of sort of start talking about many different reported encounters that kind of occurred over the years when it comes to these men in black and women in black. And some of the ones we're going to talk about tonight, guys, are very well known, and others not as much. Now, some are even reported as possibly hoaxes, but Spooky and we're not here making claims that these encounters are fake or they're real. We're just simply sharing this information that we kind of stumbled upon while doing our research when it comes to these things, to kind of just, present you guys like all tokens, like all sides of all of this, and then let you guys decide what is or isn't,
Exactly. There is one incident that has been tossed around for years when it comes to to MIBs, and some believe it to be a hoax. And others believe it was a cover-up by intelligence agents because of the strange incidents that occurred, and how several of the witnesses and those involved seem to have died in strange ways.
Yeah, that happens too. People who are involved in this stuff, if they keep pushing the truth, somehow they die by car crash, airplane, or they commit suicide because they shot themselves in the back of the head.
Yeah, some have even committed suicide.
Yeah,
exactly. Now, either real or a hoax, I felt when it came to the MIB history that this story or incident was worth sharing nonetheless. But most of you may know that I'm talking about the Maury Island incident that occurred in 1947. Now, one of the things that makes this interesting is this is prior to Roswell, and it is possibly the first claimed encounter of witnesses claiming, to be intimidated by these MIB. And also the two military intelligence officers that investigated the claim died in a plane crash before they could finish their investigation. Now, Maury Island is off the coast, is off Puget Sound in the state of Washington. But anyway, here's how the incident supposedly goes. This man named Harold Dow worked on a boat that patrolled the Puget Sound looking for logs floating on the surface of the water. These are logs that had, broken away from log jams. Mm-hmm. And they were a hazard to navigation in the Puget Sound. Now, Dow's job was to snag the log and tow it to shore at Maury Island. Now, according to Dahl, on June 21st, 1947, he was on patrol, and on the boat with him were his son and his dog. Now, around 2 p.m., as he approached Maury Island, he looked up, and he saw these 6 donut-shaped objects made of some sort of reflecting metal. And he said they were floating about 2,000 feet above his boat. Now, he said the objects were about 100 feet in diameter, and these so-called holes, because he described them as donuts, were about 25 feet in diameter. And he claimed that he saw portholes and what he described as an observation window. He said that 5 of the objects hovered over this sixth one that was slowly descending, and when it stopped, it hovered about 500 feet above the water. And of course, he said the aircraft was in obvious distress, and so Dahl steered his boat to shore because he claimed that he was afraid that the aircraft was going to crash into his boat. It was coming down so low. Now, he said that the lower ship hovered for about 5 minutes while the others circled above it, and one of the ships came down and touched the lower ship and stayed like that for several minutes. And then he said suddenly there was this loud thud, and thousands of pieces of what he thought at the time were newspaper came from inside the lower ship. And he said that most of it fell into the water, but some landed on the beach of Maury Island. Excuse me. Dahl said that he recovered some of the pieces of the debris and said it was a lightweight white metal. He also claimed that he had taken photographs of all of this. He said that the aircraft also dropped tons of dark metal that he said looked like lava rock. And he said when this dark metal hit the water, it was so hot, it sizzled, and there was steam coming up from the water.
What are they doing? Just dumping their trash?
I don't know what they were doing. It sounds like to me that he had collected more of a load than he could carry. Mm-hmm. He said several of the pieces of this dark metal landed on the boat. Some of it hit his son's arm, burning him, and another piece hit his dog and killed the dog. Mm-hmm. After this so-called rain of metal, the ships all headed west out to sea. Now, Dow, who had jumped onto shore, and he had gone back to his boat to call for help, but the radio wasn't working. So he dumped the dog into the water, and he headed back to take his son to a hospital. And after leaving the hospital, he went to his boss, a Fred Chrisman, and told him what had happened. He said he had pictures, and he gave his camera to Chrisman. Now, Chrisman had the film developed, and the photos had these spots on them. Like, you could see the ships and this stuff on the ground, mm-hmm. but there were spots all over the photographs, and they had surmised that they had been exposed to radiation. I don't know how they came to that particular conclusion.
Right. Like you stated, and like many of us know, some say this is a huge hoax, while others say that this isn't a hoax. He was just intimidated to recant his stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, but like I said, the photos did show these strange airships. Now, Chrisman did not believe Dow, so he went to Maury Island to see for himself. And while he was there, he was gathering some of the metal, and he claimed that a strange ship hovered above him as if it were watching him. The next day, Dowell told authorities what had happened, and also told them that same morning he was visited by a man in a black suit driving a new Buick. Now, the man suggested that they have breakfast, and at the restaurant, the man told Dowell what had happened the previous day in detail. And but he didn't ask Dowell any questions. He just sat there and reported to Dowell what had happened. And he did inform him, though, that if he wanted to keep himself and his family safe, he would forget about the incident completely and not say another word about it. Well, he didn't listen. Mm-hmm. Because around July 21st or the 22nd, he and Chrisman sent a package containing metal fragments and a state about the incident to a publisher in Chicago named Ray Palmer. Now, Palmer, 2 years later, Palmer would become the founder of Fate magazine. And if you're familiar with that, Fate magazine covers stuff like UFOs and things like that. Now, Palmer in turn contacted a man who investigated UFOs by the name of Kenneth Arnold. And a few days later, Arnold arrived in Tacoma, Washington. He examined Dowell's boat and interviewed him and Chrisman. Now, for some reason, they did not produce the photos at this interview. And Dowell also stated that his son was missing. When his son got out of the hospital, his son just disappeared. Yeah. But Later, eventually, though, his son was found in Montana waiting tables, but he had no memory of how he got there.
So the story goes, we don't know if
So
this
the
is
story
we
goes.
don't know if this is factual or whatever, but it has to do. It's very popular when it comes to the MIB encounters, for sure. And
Exactly.
we're just sharing it all out
Memory
there.
loss is one of the more common things about it.
Well, when you're
Now,
abducted, yeah, too.
yeah, and when you're abducted. Anyway, on July 31st, U.S. Army Air Force officers, a Captain Lee Davidson and a First Lieutenant Frank Brown, flew into Tacoma from California. Now, these two men were not only pilots, they were also intelligence specialists. They met with Arnold, Dahl, and Chrisman for several hours, and even though they felt that there was something to the story, they had to fly back to California because the very next day was when the Air Force split from the Army. And so they flew out on a B-52 bomber with a two-man crew at about 2 a.m. And they were carrying some of the metal with them.
Yeah,
20,
there's newspaper
20,
articles talking about some of these crashes. Yeah, you're right.
yeah. Well, 20 minutes into the flight, the plane crashed.
Mm-hmm.
The crew parachuted to safety, but Davidson and Brown were trapped in the plane and they died in the crash. And they said that how they became trapped was before they could jump out of the plane, one of the wings came off and hit the tail, knocking it off, and it sent the plane into a spin, and it trapped these two officers inside the plane. So, and also, by coincidence, this made them the first casualties of the Air Force. But anyway, because the local newspapers and the FBI were swamped with calls from people who claimed the plane was shot down. Apparently, they heard what they called gunfire, and some even claimed the guns were anti-aircraft guns. So the FBI launched their own investigation, and this in turn caused the Air Force to expand their investigation. Well, one
I'm sorry, I'm holding back, but come on. A lot of times, certain things happen, and it has to do with the government taking down their own people that they have because they want, things to be silent and out of the limelight and everything
I
else.
found it kind of odd that only 20 minutes into the flight, and
And they're
the two-man
professional
crew,
pilots.
yeah, well, the two-man crew were a pilot and a co-pilot that had flew numerous times, had a lot of air hours.
Yeah, strange things
So,
happen to people when they get too close to multiple things that can't be discussed.
exactly. Well, one of the Air Force investigators declared that the crash was just a terrible accident, and another Air Force investigator spoke with Dowell and Chrisman and even inspected their boat. Now, he stated that the damage to the boat did not match their story, and there were no piles of metal on Maury Island. He also stated that the metal he did examine was nothing more than slag from a metal smelter, which is junk metal.
Yep.
The FBI investigator agreed with them, and he concluded that Dahl and Chrisman had faked the entire story to gain publicity for a magazine article.
That magazine article must have been paying a lot of money.
Must have been. The FBI also told Dahl and Chrisman that their hoax had failed, and if they dropped the story and declared it a hoax, they would not be prosecuted for fraud that resulted in the deaths of two officers. Now, that sounded fishy to me too, because it just seems to me if it was a hoax, they would have went ahead and prosecuted them for that fraud. But anyway, at first they agreed and even stated that the story was fake. They refused to give interviews or even talk about it, but just a few years later, like I think it was in the January 1950 issue of Fate magazine, Chrisman stated that it did happen and that they were intimidated to give their statements about faking the story. And also in 1952, Arnold wrote a book titled The Coming of the Saucers, and he included the Maury Island incident. But to this day, there is no evidence to back up their claim.
Just to let you guys know, again, after our show tonight in the descriptions, I will be adding the link to the full FBI report so you guys can read it yourself about this encounter. It's from the, the Blue Book archive section. But, when you were talking about, first of all, when somebody tends to have really messed up encounters, it's hard to talk about it because you are putting yourself out there for judgment and ridicule for the rest of your entire life.
Exactly.
So most of many who do come out are not fakes, and they're not frauds, and they're not threatened by the government to shut up about their fake fraudness. Because if that was the case, the government would be knocking on everybody's door about everything they're typing on the internet. You know what I mean? If they're always going after people who are faked. You know what I mean? I'm not saying if this incident occurred or if it did not, but there's a lot in there that seems bizarre. But we're going to, share the FBI reports that are now unclassified so people can read it. But, I mean, who knows if they're even telling the truth that's in these reports anyway. I mean, because they're going to doctor it up to whatever they want to.
It makes me wonder, though. It really makes me wonder because 20 minutes into the flight, the plane crashes. Mm-hmm. Okay? You got 2 dead officers. Mm-hmm. The pilot and the co-pilot make it out of the plane, but these 2 officers are still in that plane. Mm-hmm. And then they tell these men that their story is a hoax, and if they publicly declare that they made up the story and it was all a hoax, they would not prosecute them for fraud that resulted in the deaths of 2 officers.
Yeah, there's just a lot of things that are weird that would be from the government side of stating stuff.
But I know. Why are they willing to let go of the deaths of those 2 officers?
Mm-hmm. Do you remember, speaking of hoaxes and whatnot, and we're not saying this is or isn't, we're just presenting it out there, let y'all decide on your own, but you remember, besides the MJ-12s I was talking about and the MIB theories and stuff, while I was doing my research through the years on, many different interesting topics we've talked about we're going to do shows on too, I fell upon, a lot of different, sites and books and films where people who spoke about the Mirage Men. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of the Mirage Men, there's even a documentary, I think, that was just done on it not that long ago. I think it even played on the History Channel just this year, a few months back or whatever. But they claim, I think it was 50 or 60 years, that the government and the U.S. Air Force and other intelligence services actually have manipulated people on UFOs and, extraterrestrials encounters, and it's part of this counterintelligence program. What the Mirage Men are, and it's what they do is they purposely manipulated. They go into these large groups and communities of people who are gathering together for UFO stuff and paranormal stuff and cryptid stuff or whatever, but they work their way into the communities, and they produce fake documents and evidence, and some think they did it to deceive people into believing that all this stuff is real, and it's to really hide something that's darker, get everybody convinced that there are aliens, there are UFOs, but actually there isn't. There's just something far much darker. While others believe that these men, these military officers and intelligence agents and stuff, they did all these actions as a threat and a smokescreen to make people think that all UFO and alien stuff is nothing but a hoax. You know what I mean? If you throw in this fake stuff, then you can prove to hey, all these people who are in these communities are nothing but nuts, okay? Because they'll be showing the fake stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and these Mirage Men, I don't know if it was mentioned or not, but they're ex-government officials who decided to...
No, yeah, that's what I said. For 50 and 60 years, the government and the U.S. Air Force and other intelligence services moved into the groups and gave them fake documents and evidence.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't.
I know I'm talking a little fast. I know I'm talking about, but yeah, the Mirage Men are legit government agents or people who work for intelligence services who are out there manipulating people in many forms and fashion, and it was as for a counterintelligence program, But it's not just military officers who are having these encounters with Men in Black either, because you were just kind of talking about military stuff, but even average everyday citizens what I was reading upon have spoken about having strange run-ins. You know,
Right.
I was reading this one case from the MUFON site, and it had occurred in the summer of 1954. A family was flying from California to Texas, and they said while they were in flight, they actually noticed like this cigar silver shaped craft flying near the plane's wing, and everybody was staring at the object, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, in the plane, of course, you're gonna be like, "What the blank is that?" You know what I mean? Because it didn't have any wings. They said it didn't have any
think
engines.
blank was the word they said, but
well,
go ahead.
we don't swear on our show. We try not to. You may hear us once in a blue moon. We're human, but the craft they said had no wings, it had no engines, it created absolutely no sound, and you know, all these people were just staring at this craft, and it was keeping pace with the plane, you know, right next to its wing, and then all of a sudden it took off at this like high rate of speed, and it was gone. And when the plane arrived on the tarmac in Texas, two men dressed in black, you know, your typical MIB men, they boarded the full plane, and they asked all the passengers if they had seen anything strange, and if they did, to stay in their seats so they could speak about that. You know, they wanted to talk to them about it. And they asked if anybody had any cameras on them too. Well, the mother, and you know, she told her kid, she's like, let's just say we saw nothing, because she said, I don't want to be stuck in this plane here all day. So they didn't raise their hand. They said, we didn't see anything. So they walked off the plane while everybody else stayed on, you know. And it was case number 67 or 67322. That was the case number to this. But how did these guys get there instantly, right when the plane landed in Texas? And, you know, how did they know what these people saw? Why were they so curious to talk to these people? What happened? And why did they want to know if they had a camera, you know?
Well, it seems like your typical Men in Black encounter. They just seem to show up just right after an incident.
That one I thought was interesting, because this was just an average thing. And a lot of people, you know, they have no problem saying, yeah, we saw this, whatever. But nowadays, you know, people are, you know, I think this was in the 80s when it happened or something. It wasn't that long ago, or 50s. Maybe it was 50s or 80s. Anyway, but it makes you wonder, you know, what they told the other passengers who stayed on that plane, who did tell, hey, we saw this. You know, was this a typical Men in Black encounter, or were they just like the Air Force agents, or you know, somebody who worked for the airplane company, which I highly doubt they would care, you know. But I mean, obviously it was a big deal for them to be there instantly, you know. And I personally don't believe that every claim out there is a hoax, that, you know, some secret intelligence agencies, you know, are trying to brainwash everyone into believing that everything that's ever reported with the paranormal, with the UFOs, with cryptids, with everything that's not supposed to be real. You know, there are people out there who are trying to convince everybody to not to believe in these things, but there's too many of everybody who, because of the internet, are sharing their truths, sharing their evidence. So obviously there is things that are occurring, even if not everybody's experienced it. There's enough people out there that are experiencing these things. Now, I believe that many of these encounters that people have are real, you know, when it comes to these cases with the cryptids and the paranormal. You know, it takes a lot to come out and tell people, hey, this is happening, you know? And I think that's why a lot of us started coming on the internet and finding each other, or forming our own shows or whatever, so that other people who are like-minded we can all come together and have something positive and just share with each other and not feel alone too. And that's one of the reasons why we started doing our show too, remember?
Right, it is. We wanted a place where people could share their experiences, share their thoughts, their beliefs, whatever, and everything, and not be harassed about it.
Yeah, and us talk with, you know, and just meet other like-minded people and just grow and everything else. But, you know, there was another incident of this woman I was reading. You know, she was driving home from work, and she kind of got turned about and lost a little bit on back roads. And then she came up to this, like, edge of a farm field, and she saw this really strange, like, craft, and it was pulsating just above the ground. And you know, she was looking at like, what the hell is that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, she said this SUV came out of nowhere, just like speeding at her. She thought it was going to hit her. And these men, you know, they kind of get out of the vehicle. And she said the men they looked kind of pale skinned. They were typically, your men in black gear. They're wearing sunglasses, everything, and they demanded for her to leave the vicinity immediately, and she shouldn't be there. And of course, she explains to them like, "Hey, I'm just lost. I got turned about." And then they kind of verbally told her in a not a very pleasant way the directions to leave the area, and she left. But
it kind of makes you wonder about Area 51, because every time somebody goes to a certain point, when they go out there to look, those UFO enthusiasts and researchers and stuff, there's always a vehicle that appears on the hill watching them.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as they hit a certain point, there's that vehicle.
I think it's interesting. But, there's some people in chat, like, I don't believe that in any of this stuff. And that's okay. Everybody has their own right to their own belief system. But there are people who are physically having these encounters and experiences. And, I'm not going to knock what they're... I've seen things. I've had experience. You've had experience and stuff. But, we understand, because I didn't believe in stuff either until I actually physically started happening to me,
Right.
too. But, I just think it's weird. How did this vehicle show up out of nowhere and start yelling at her when she saw this space type of craft? It could have been a government craft, too, for all we know.
Could have been.
I don't know.
Because they're experimenting with different aircrafts all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You want to take a quick break before we get into the next story?
Oh, yeah, we're almost into the second hour. All right, we're going to take like a quick 3-minute break and get something to drink, let you guys stretch, get a snack or whatever. Don't leave. Still stay with us. We have a lot more to talk about. We appreciate everybody coming and hanging out with us and sharing the show with everybody. We'll be back in 3 minutes, and we'll continue our discussion on Men in Black and everything else. Welcome back to Anything But Ordinary. I'm your host, Raven, and Spooky is back with us. Tonight, our
How
top.
do you know?
You always say that. I do know. I hear you breathing. Tonight's topic is Men in Black. We're kind of discussing all the different supposed reports and/or encounters that people have claimed to have had when it comes to being harassed, threatened, or seeing people who seem to be out of place and strange. I myself, I don't know if, because we talk about a lot of things, and a lot of times we're not 100% believers on stuff, but we do find it fascinating. We do find it interesting. And
Right.
like we said, to everything there is some truths. There are small smidges and truths to everything, and there's just a lot going on, and the world's bigger than my own backyard. But as far as a lot of the things that we're sharing tonight, are they 100% real? Are they fake? We don't know, but it's all tied in when it comes to the Men in Black. And we just want to again thank you, the person who emailed us and sent in a request. We enjoy checking out different things we may or may have not have ever really looked into, and it kind of makes us bigger, as far as our mind goes, looking into different things and learning new things too. So we totally love communicating back and forth with everybody else, and we really love the people who come and hang out with us too, because you guys are like our friends and our family. And me and Spooky, we never claim to be experts or about anything, but we definitely love bantering about a wide variety of things just for the heck of it too.
Yeah, even when we just talk, which we talk quite often, we talk about anything and everything. It's just whatever gets our attention. We'll talk about it. We don't care if we know anything about it or not.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of things that just you're like, that's interesting. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But you said you were talking about, what were you saying you were going to just talk about before we took the break?
This next report is a Dr. Herbert Hopkins, and it happened in 1976. Dr. Hopkins was a respected family physician that lived in Old Orchard, Maine. Now, he was also researching a UFO incident that happened not far from where he lived, and he had been researching it for some time, couple 3 years. In a 1978 interview for an NBC broadcast, he told this story. He said on September 11th, 1976, he was home alone, and he received a phone call from a man who claimed to be a representative of a UFO organization from New Jersey. Well, this later turned out to be completely untrue. But he asked Dr. Hopkins if he could come by and talk to him about his research. So Dr. Hopkins, thinking it was a fellow enthusiast, said yes. Well, he claimed that he hung up his phone and he walked to his front door to turn the light on for this man, and the man was already coming up his stairs. He said that even if the man had phoned from across the street or even next door, he couldn't have got there as fast as he did. Well, the description of the man he gave is as follows, and I'm quoting this. This is what was in the report. He wore a neatly tailored black suit, black shoes, black socks, a white shirt, and a black tie. And he wore a black derby. He said, you don't see derbies very often, and I thought to myself, this guy looks just like an undertaker. When he sat down, he removed his derby, and he said this character was as bald as an egg. He didn't even have eyebrows or eyelashes, and it looked like he had smooth plastic skin like a doll, except that it was a dead white color.
Yeah, there's a lot of cases that people talk about them, because some say they have blonde hair, some say they have black hair, and then there's other people who say they're like totally, they don't even have peach fuzz or anything. They could never.
I know,
have
there's
hair,
just
nothing,
not a hair
nothing.
on them.
I don't even think they have eyebrows half the time. That would freak me out more. It'd be like, what are you, like the Plastic Man or like Alien more in nature? I don't know. I wouldn't even. I'd be like, let's go outside, and then the guy walks out, slam the door, and get my gun. Not happening. Not today.
Not today. He said his lips were a brilliant ruby red, and he spoke in an expressionless, monotone, scanning speech. He constructed no phrases and sentences, just a sequence of words evenly spaced. His voice was completely passive with no inflection or intonation, as if he were hearing it from a machine that could talk. Dr. Hopkins also
What?
stated,
That's weird.
yeah, that was weird. I thought that was weird too when I read that. Dr. Hopkins also stated he sat perfectly motionless and wore gray suede gloves. He idly brushed his lips with the back of a glove, and when he put his hand down, the back of his glove was bright red and the red on his mouth was smeared, so he knew he was wearing lipstick. He said the man did not ask any questions, but sat there and told him about the doctor's research and what he had uncovered. And he sat and told the doctor, according to Dr. Hopkins, told him everything he had.
I would not.
Doctor,
I don't know. Sorry. I'll leave my thought
no,
for a
that's
while. I don't
okay.
want you to lose your thought, but go ahead. I'll tell you later.
Dr. Hopkins says he knew every little detail of the research. Go ahead with your thought.
I'm writing it down. Keep talking.
Okay. Dr. Hopkins said the man took a coin from his pocket and he told the doctor to watch it. Dr. Hopkins said he watched, it was a copper penny, and he said that he watched the penny and it turned from copper to silver to a bluish tint. And then the penny became blurry and it completely disappeared in front of him. Now, after the coin vanished, the man ordered Dr. Hopkins to destroy all of his research about the UFO incident that he had collected. Dr. Hopkins also stated that the man's speech started to become very, very slow, and the man announced that his energy was very low and he was losing his strength and that he had to leave. So he said that the man went out the door and the doctor watched him and noticed that the man had clung to the rail as if he were afraid he would fall. And each step he took was very, very slow, and he would take like one step at a time. He'd go down a step, put his other foot down, and then go down another one. He said that the man then walked down the street and he walked into this real bright light and he just vanished. And Dr. Hopkins also stated that he was so startled and afraid that he immediately went and destroyed all of his research, and he never spoke of it again until this 1978 interview.
You know, people are talking in chat about their kind of beliefs of what the Men in Black are, from time travelers to, reanimated corpses. Thus, maybe that's why they have to wear makeup and stuff. You know what I mean? Maybe they're like body snatchers. They come in and use people's bodies, or some of the stuff that you're talking about, all of a sudden they have energy for a little bit and then they can't maintain it. So maybe they're some form of, gosh, I don't even know how to quite say this, but maybe they're from, like if people want to say they're from time travelers or they're from the future, maybe they have this form of ability to project themselves to a certain time period and can only maintain or hold them. Like maybe they're not even in the area. They might be across the country in a spaceship, whatever, underground, and they project themselves to be there at that place.
Well, maybe being from space, though, it's weightless in space. There's no gravity up there. Maybe the gravity of the Earth is just sapping their strength because they're having such a hard time walking that they get tired.
Yeah, you know how people can astral project or whatever. Maybe these things can project a being of themselves into a place, but they only have so much strength or energy enough to do it for so lengthy of time, and when they start to fade out, that's why they talk about these things. Well, they'll watch them walk down and then all of a sudden, gone. You know what I mean?
Well, it has to sap your strength to astral project. I
don't know, but there's so many
it seems to, I don't know
theories that
I don't know
have.
anybody that's ever done it, okay, and I've never done it myself, but
I do it when I come to steal your pantry goods.
Yeah, that's where they're going. But it just seems to me that takes a lot of energy, and that would sap your strength.
Right. You got the interdimensional beings, you got all these different things that everybody's talking about, and these are different opinions and theories that everybody has. And we're just trying to lay it all out on the table. We're not saying one way or the other. Like someone was talking about the holographic technology. Yeah, that's what I was trying to think of. I was trying to think of the best way to kind of describe that. But do you recall? Oh, and the photo we have up now was the FBI report of this incident that you were talking about, and we're gonna have the link to where you guys can go and read that one too, and references after the show ends tonight. I'm gonna change the description so you guys go and click on and check out the other stuff. Do you recall back in the 1980s when they were hearing about this strange UFO incident that occurred in England in that one forest? I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, Rendlesham Forest. That was Britain's Roswell incident. Yeah, I've heard about it.
Yeah, I think I got a picture of the gate section. Yeah, I do. Well, as that story goes, for those of you who may have not heard of it, it happened back in the 1980s between December 26th and the 28th, where two air traffic control operators at the RAF Bentwaters in Suffolk, they kind of tracked on their radar this unidentified object that was traveling at a very high rate of speed. And then on the 26th, two military police officers seen this large triangular craft land in that forest just outside the bases, because there was two military bases right there that said to have had nuclear type of weapons and other things, you know. And I think I read somewhere it was actually being leased to the United States Air Force at that time. Anyway, a few nights later, these strange lights were being observed by Lieutenant Colonel Halt and other the Air Force officers. Gosh,
right.
My brain's going blank. Anyway, they saw these lights moving about amongst the trees in the forest. So, of course, they got to go out and investigate because it's right next to their bases. You know, that's their job. Anyway, when they were out there investigating, this beam of light hit the ground a few feet away from them. And supposedly this one man, Penston, I think his name was, he actually touched the object, this triangle UFO type of object, and they actually radioed back and requested assistance, because who wouldn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, really.
They're just like, there's only a couple of us and we need some backup. So of course they sent like several armed units, and they claimed that they were near this craft, and when everybody was like next to this craft, they experienced like strange effects having to do with like, you know, reality bending effects, you know, time issues. Some even spoke of seeing these alien type beings that were not BEANS but BEINGS that were floating in these like strange clear bubble like objects around the craft, and they were when what had to do with this incident. Now, I guess after this incident, the men who were involved in seeing this and who encountered this, they were taken by your typical MIBs and brought down to this underground area, and they were shown this film of like a variety of different UFO recoveries around the world, and then they were questioned and debriefed, and then they were threatened to never speak openly of anything, you know. But you know, it's not just, and I think they also said that supposedly there was like an alien hanging out in the room too, but I don't know. But why is it always the typical dressed in black garment when it has to do with UFO? Don't they wear any other suits or jeans and a t-shirt? It seems like everybody's always talking this dressed in the same
Well,
MO.
according to the movies, it makes them anonymous, like they're blending in with everybody else, you know. I personally, in the middle of my friends, I would notice someone wearing a black suit.
I know people, I know a lot of government agents are dressed a certain way, drab or whatever too. I mean, because you see,
well, you have plainclothes investigators too, you know, and they usually wear suits. The people who guard
our presidential, our government agent, or we have the government security.
Well, the Secret Service, they're all in
black
suits.
So maybe they're the men in black. They're aliens.
FBI agents are in suits, a lot of them.
They do say some of them are aliens that are integrated into our government, you know, and whatever else. But that's a whole nother show. But, you know,
really.
You know, when it comes to these men in black and women in black, it's not just UFO sightings that people have encountered. these people. We'll just call them people. I mean, I don't know what they are. But, it happens in the cryptid world, too. People who are encountering, Bigfoots and dogmens and other reptilian creatures and chupacabras and everything, whatever else people are saying, Because there was this one incident that occurred in Derry Township in Pennsylvania. It was at this trailer park. And there were several people who witnessed this Bigfoot in the area. It was actually in the trailer park, messing about their property, messing with the trailers, messing with, electrical poles nearby, just a lot of stuff. A lot of people seen it because it was coming around for a few days. Okay.
A lot of things happen in trailer parks.
Spooky. But anyway, they contacted this Bigfoot researcher guy and, the people who lived in the trailer park, this one lady for sure. And she was talking to him. And then, they came out and whatnot. They kind of investigated. And then, they went back or whatever. And then several days later, the woman called this guy again and told him that she had found some Bigfoot hair on the outside of her trailer and whatnot. And she said this man came up to her trailer, a couple days ago and claimed he was there investigating the sightings of the Bigfoot in the area. And this man claimed that he knew the person that she was in contact with and that he was actually sent there to pick up the hair samples and bring them back to that man. And during that time when she was talking with him, another neighbor came out saying, here, I have some photos of the creature that's been about. And of course, this man, he's looking at it, and he was dressed in your typical Men in Black, gear. He's got the suit on and everything. Yeah. Well, he took the hair samples, put it in his pocket. He took the photo, put it in his pocket. And they're like, oh, there's some footprints evidence all over here. So they took him back and they showed him the footprints evidence. And while they were talking, he just started to destroy all the footprints. He was just kicking it and getting rid of all evidence there. And, of course, they started yelling at him, hey, knock it off. Don't do that. We want our stuff back. Who are you? And they got really upset with him. And then he took off, got in his car, and drove away. And he didn't give back the hair samples. He didn't give back the photos. And, when she called this guy that she was in contact with, like, hey, your person that you sent here, I'm really upset. And he's like, I didn't send anybody. I don't know who you're talking about. That guy has nothing to do with us at all, And so who was this guy? How did he know that they were seeing Bigfoot? How did he know that she had hair samples and there was photographs of this stuff? And who, what? Again, your typical MIB. Now, there was this other gentleman, because I was digging around trying to find as much as I could, because that's what we try to do for everybody. There was this other guy I found on the net, and he shared his encounters with his Bigfoot and Dogman experiences. And he is being harassed by the Men in Black, too. Well, he actually uploaded his story onto YouTube. I believe his account name is Kentucky Outlaw. And I'm going to post a link to his encounter for, whoever's listening tonight or who listens in the future on our podcast. They can go and check out him sharing his story. It's very lengthy, but he talks about what he saw. And then he starts talking about these strange men coming around him and harassing him and stuff. But, Spooky and I, we're not saying these encounters are real or they're fake. These are just things that we've come across while we were doing the research when it comes to Men in Black and Women in Black. And it doesn't have to do with just UFOs and aliens. It seems to be stretching across all the oddities with the paranormal world, too, and cryptid stuff.
Right. It just, like I said, I was amazed when I was researching this, how far this particular subject does reach. It's not just, when I think of Men in Black, I normally think of UFO aliens, but I mean, this goes into cryptids, it goes into the paranormal, it goes into a lot of things.
Yeah.
Do you recall that one photo that circled around that was taken by Jim Templeton, I think in 1964? The one he took of his 5-year-old daughter, and there's a spaceman standing behind her. They were on an outing at the Berg Marsh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. And I also, when you were kind of telling me about that before, I kind of dug up, and I did actually found a photo where we can actually use it. But when in this photo, like you're saying, they were claiming this person wasn't there at the time when they took that picture.
Right. Well, according to some sites and such, at one point while Mr. Templeton was working at the firehouse, two men, your typical MIB official, showed up and asked him to take them out to the spot at the Berg Marsh where he had taken the photo.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Templeton said that these two men didn't identify themselves by name, but only by numbers. And they identified themselves as number 9 and number 10, and they even showed him their badges. He said that these
That's the weird thing. Like,
nope, I know.
You can't know my name. He's number 9, and I'm number 10. It's like, okay, dude.
Yeah. I know. I thought that was strange, too. He said that these men were dressed in black and arrived in a dark vintage Jaguar. And he and the men went to the marsh and they asked him to point out the spot, which he did. And they asked him several questions about that day's events, who was around in the area at that time, what the weather was like, what each person or animal had been doing at that time.
How are you going to know? Okay, this bird was pooping in that tree. It was about 1:22. You know, how do you know what that...
Saw a bear scratching on a tree.
Yeah.
I don't know.
These people were having a picnic here. Those people were having sex. Who knows? I mean, nobody pays attention. Like, this ant was carrying a piece of bread. That's a lot of bizarre things to ask, you know? I'm just like, really?
I got so much I could say about that last statement, but I'm not going to.
Sorry.
But I may make a trip out to the Berg Marsh just to see what I can see.
But the thing is, you know, if somebody was asking you those questions, you'd end up being sarcastic anyway.
Well,
like, really,
you would, because, you know, I mean, Joe Blow over there with his dog. How do I know what his dog was doing?
Pooping.
You know, I wasn't paying attention to his dog. He was carrying a Frisbee. He had something in his mouth.
Yeah. No. Yeah. But
another dog. But anyway,
all he can answer is for himself and what his daughter was doing.
Exactly.
That's in his view of sight. Mm-hmm.
Well, after one point, the men changed their demeanor and they began to badger Mr. Templeton, and they accused him of making it all up. You know, and then they returned to their car and took off, and they left him behind. How rude is that?
I know. I mean, that's kind of like
this
rude.
Poor guy, he goes out there to show him.
Yeah.
You know, and the next thing he knows, he's standing there alone wondering what happened.
They get mad at him. They didn't like his answers. Then they told him, you know, you're fake, you're nothing. They go back to their car and they peel out of there. And this guy's got to walk all the way back to the fireplace. Who knows? It could not fireplace, firehouse. Firehouse. Yeah. But, I mean, he could have been, like, hours away. And they just totally ditched him. Not only are the men in black weird, but they're rude.
They're rude.
And they'll ditch you. Just don't even ride with them.
Don't get in the car with them. No.
And if you do...
They will ditch you.
Yeah. Bring bus fare.
Yeah. Yeah, bring bus fare.
Call an Uber, you know?
Make sure your friend knows where you're going and who you're going with. But were these men...
Excuse me, I'm going to go away with this man who's bald. Yeah. Looks like he's got a plastic head.
Two strangers want me to take a ride with them.
Their eyes are glowing.
I don't know either one of them. Just met them, but I'm going.
Be back in a little bit, Fred.
Yeah, maybe. I might be walking.
Yeah,
but
not happening.
Were these your typical MIBs, you know? And was the event even real or not? I mean, it does fall in line with what we're talking about tonight, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not knocking if this happened or it didn't happen, but, I mean, it is kind of rude. They seem to be very pleasant for a second, and then they snap. It's like they're bipolar, you know? They don't ever have any good intentions, it seems, but nothing to basically threaten and intimidate people. It's like, what's the point? And
this is what gets me too. Mm-hmm. In all of these reports talking about intimidation, in all these reports I read, they make threats, you know, that they never carry through with. But
that we know of.
The threats are just part of the intimidation. But that we know of,
because maybe there are people who were going to, you know, that did have an encounter and, you know, they were speaking out, because there are people in the communities with the UFO, cryptids, and everything else that are being knocked off in strange ways.
I know, but just remember, folks, do not get in the car with men dressed in black.
Or women in black.
Or women in black, or any stranger.
Don't give out your evidence either.
No, don't give them your evidence.
Yeah. You know, kind of when we're talking about men in black and women in black, and we're kind of joking a little bit about But that's me and Spooky's personality. We can't be like 100% serious all the time because, I mean, you'd have to be like a robot and soulless, you know. We're not knocking anybody's encounters. We're not knocking the people who came out or anything like that. We're just more of knocking the Men in Black for being rude. But, you know, when it comes to this, you have the Mothman encounters. Remember the Mothman stuff? Because Men in Black had a huge role, supposedly, when it comes to the Men in Black. I don't know if Spooky got knocked off or not. Her internet's kind of going in and out, so I'm just going to...
I'm here. Okay. Sorry.
You went quiet.
I accidentally hit my mute button. I apologize.
But tonight I thought we kind of have to kind of talk a little bit about the Mothman incident that occurred in West Virginia and Point Pleasant during the 1960s. We're not going to go into great detail on this subject tonight because we're saving this for another show topic because this too, the Mothman, was a viewer's request. So, of course, we're going to do that topic all by itself, give its own 2 shower.
We're going to give it a shower.
2 hours.
Or show. 2.
Yeah, maybe 4.
Yeah, who knows?
Man, I can't talk tonight. It's going to have its own 2-hour show because it was requested by a viewer. And we are going to touch on that for you guys.
And there is a whole lot of that to that, too. But we're just going to touch on it just a bit.
Yeah, because it has to do with the Men in Black. And there's several...
We're not going to give it a shower here. We're just going to give it a sprinkle.
Yeah, a little sprinkle. Cat mist, the misting bottle that you use on your cat. But, several people had run-ins with the Men in Black because of their connection with the Mothman incident. Now, Mary Hare, she worked for that Athens Messenger, and she was the local newspaper journalist, and she reported a lot when it came to all the incidences that occurred there in the area. And many think that this is why she had her own encounter with the Men in Black, who visited her supposedly more than once in attempts to kind of silence her and to get her to stop writing in the papers about all this. But, one night, I think it was in 66 or 67, she was working late at the county courthouse, and this man dressed in black, he was a little bit shorter. She said he was wearing like he had like strange eyes. And he was wearing glasses, but she could still see that his eyes weren't natural or normal looking. And he came in, he kind of asked for directions, and then he kind of spoke in a very strange manner, kind of like a halty voice, just not in a natural conversing way.
Right.
And at one point, he began to kind of change his tone and became more stern, saying she had no right to print these articles in the paper. And, of course, she got a little scared because she didn't know who he was. And, of course, his demeanor's changing. He's getting a little testy with her. So she called for the manager to come over. And they both spoke with this man at the time. And according to her, well, then he took off. He grabbed a pen from her desk, looked at it, laughed or something, and took off. And then, but she had like tons of run-ins with this man several times in the town, and he'd been kind of stalking her and watching her. And you also have Connie Carpenter, who I think was Mary's niece. She too had a run-in with these Men in Black, back in 1966, because Connie was one who had seen the Mothman when she was like 18 years old. Which I'm going to go in more detail when we do that show on the Mothman on its own, But she, too, had, like, this run-in with the Men in Black. And I think it was in 1967. She said she was walking to school, and she saw this large, black 49 Buick pull up alongside her, and the car door opened, and this man called her over. So at first she thought, because it's the 50s and 40s, everybody's friendly and whatnot. So at first she thought this person needed directions, So she was going to go help him. So she approached the vehicle, and that's when she noticed that it was like extremely, like, I don't know, everything was weird. The guy was clean cut. He was about mid-20s. His skin was kind of tan, and he was wearing like a strange shirt. And she said as she approached the car, she noticed that everything looked brand new on the inside and the outside. And that's when the man tried to grab her and tried pushing her into the car. And of course she struggled and got away. But I figured since we're talking about all of this tonight, we had to talk a little bit about the Mothman stuff, because a lot of the people who were encountering that Mothman thing, the bridge collapse, and we're speaking about all that stuff, they were being harassed and having run-ins or being, having conversations with these men in black, and of course, since we're doing a show on it, I figured I'd throw that in there a little bit, you know what I mean?
Well, I agree. I find it interesting that not only those who have had encounters with strange crafts, but also, with strange beings and the paranormal are being harassed by these MIBs and WIBs.
Women in black.
And women in black. And Raven is right. We will be doing the Mothman sometime. It was requested by a viewer, and we will be getting to that.
Yeah, we try our best to get to all of them when we can.
Yeah, I thought this one was interesting. When I was searching the net, I came across something that occurred in 2002. Now, a lot of you out there know who Dan Aykroyd is. Saturday Night Live, Ghostbusters, a variety of other movies. The man is very well known. In 2001, he sold a series to the Sci-Fi Channel called Out There. Now, this was supposed to be a serious, groundbreaking series that revolved around UFOs and crop circles and abductions and other encounters with aliens. And he had several interviews with people that were well known in the field, and he already had these interviews on tape. And this included researchers, ex-government people, abductees, the whole 9 yards. I mean, Dan Aykroyd was really getting into this, and he wanted
sort of like a Jesse Ventura show, or
he wanted to get this out there to the people, because I believe I read somewhere where he was a really, really firm believer in this sort of thing. Well, the show was scheduled to air in February of 2002, and he was talking on the phone to Britney Spears. He stepped outside to take a break, and he was on the phone to Britney Spears because she was going to be on Saturday Night Live and wanted him to do the show with her. Anyway, he turned his head and he saw this black Ford. And he said that a very tall man dressed in black stepped out of the car, stood beside it, looked him in the eyes, and gave him a very dirty look. Aykroyd said that he tried to read the license plate, but it was blurred. He said he just, turned away for a second, not even a second, just turned his head and turned it right back, and the car was gone. And he said that there was no way that car could have disappeared as fast as it did, not where he was at, because he said that he would have seen it no matter which way it went. And he even said that he tried to look for the car, and he couldn't find it anywhere.
Yeah, I think he said there was no way for it to just take off as fast as it did, because it was too large, too big, and for it to just...
Yeah, he said because, he says a car going from 0 to 40 or whatever, he said this was a big car, it would have taken it, quite a bit. He would have seen it before it got to the end of the block.
Yeah.
Well, 2 hours later, the producers came in and told Aykroyd that they were warned to stop taping and the show was canceled. And none of the interviews would be aired. So now Aykroyd, he's contemplating either on finding another channel to air the show, or he's even thinking about just releasing them on DVD.
Yeah,
and there is on YouTube, there is an interview with Dan Aykroyd on YouTube about this particular incident.
But then we don't know if it's factual or if it's fictional. It's all for ratings, or was it, for people to buy his DVDs. We don't know for sure. But I do believe that people are intimidated in many forms and with a lot of different things. And, even the industry of Hollywood and
I know, but
stuff. So
I watched the interview,
I'm
you
sure
know,
there's a
and
lot of
he's,
people who've been harassed not to talk about the
yeah,
JFK stuff, being that today
yeah,
is the
exactly,
JFK anniversary.
exactly. But I watched Aykroyd's interview and watched him as he was telling the story, and he's very candid about it,
Mm-hmm.
and very, he seems to be very straightforward with it, and I kind of believe that this happened.
It possibly could have. I mean, I don't. I mean, there. So many of us have had so many different
Now, I'm not saying
encounters.
that they were regular MIBs, but maybe there was somebody out there that just did not want some of these interviews aired
Yeah.
because
Mm-hmm.
he was going, you know, ex-government officials, you know, pilots, abductees,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I mean, he was going into all areas of UFOs and crop circles and stuff like that. And that's what the show was based on.
Well, there's even, astronauts when they were in space, if they went to space. There's people who
Yeah.
believe that we've never been to space, but they've been told you can never speak about the things that you said. There's military officers who are people who run amongst us, now veterans and everything else. They still can't talk about the things that they dealt with. And there's some people who've said that they worked in underground bases and worked along aliens or
Mm-hmm.
everything else. And this world is so bizarre, and there's so many things that are happening. I'm not saying these people are not having these experiences, nor am I saying they
Well,
didn't.
what
But
about
I
that
just
China?
go ahead.
What about that Chinese pilot that left Alaska? I mean, that aircraft that he spotted, the UFO that followed him, it followed him for a long, long time. I mean, he got a good look at it. And this was a man that had hours and years of flying.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean, me and you aren't saying we don't believe in this stuff either. We're trying to keep our opinions more out of it to leave it openly for everybody to because we don't want to pressure people into believing one way or the other. We try to make our show as neutral as we can and present different things, but I mean, there's so many theories. When it comes to the men in black and the women in black, but there always seems to be similar common factors when it comes to people who have encountered them. I mean, many has to do with them being warned, warning people you can't speak about they can't talk about their encounters. They need to stop any and all activity or research
Yeah.
that they might be doing on these things that deal with the strange incidences, or they're demanding them to hand over any and all evidence that may have when that they might have when it comes to these UFOs or cryptids or the paranormal or all the odd things that we're not supposed to believe in. Like, none of this exists. Just believe what we say, be good little sheep, and live in your own backyard. That's it. There's believe what we want you to
Yeah,
believe.
be good little sheepo, put your blinders on. Your government would never do anything to harm you
Yeah, but this is what's going on. I mean, they're
or
typically
keep secrets from you.
right, but this is like they there's a reason why certain people are having these experiences, because they're getting a little too close to truth is what they're saying. But they're typically always dressed in the black attire. That's what we're always seeing when we were doing the research.
Right.
They have this strange monotone voice, or they don't know how to speak properly, or like you said, they were using a voice box. It makes me think of South Park, the voice box. But they're middle age-ish, their 20s or 30s. They have like thin lips.
20s or 30s is not middle aged.
Well, whatever. Okay. Anyway, it is nowadays. It is today because I said so. But anyway, they're somewhere in the middle, range between 20s and 40s. Okay, just they're in the middle of birth and death. Okay.
Yeah.
They have thin lips, which meaning they don't really have lips.
Yeah, they were described as just slits.
Right. They always say that they tend to have slanted, long, narrow, either black eyes or they're glowing eyes. They say they have like a tannish complexion, where others report that they have like pale, flawless skin. Now, they always seem to also show up in their vintage black colored pristine vehicles, which, hey, that's what I want. You know how much money
Me too.
you could
I
get?
know. Do you know what those things are worth? in in
No, I don't.
in
Don't make
well,
me
I
get my
do.
calculator out. It depends on what. Are you talking about the Jaguar? Are you talking about a Buick?
Any of them is
Yeah.
worth
If
money.
they're
The
in like
Jaguar's worth a
perfect
bundle,
condition,
but any
yeah.
of them.
Don't make me get my calculator and do math. But they're showing up in these perfect, out of date vehicles that just came out of nowhere.
In flawless condition.
Right. But they also talk about all of these men having information pertaining to that person and their experience, which was never revealed publicly at all. How do they know this stuff? How are they aware of all this stuff? There's even talk of that these people were having these run-ins with these men and women that
Sometimes they showed up before the person, right after something happened, before the person could even tell anybody
or process their thought of what the heck
or
they just
process their
saw.
thoughts.
Yeah, or they
Whoa,
show
did I
up.
just see that?
Yeah, or they show up right at the time when it's occurring. Like they just come out of nowhere. Like they have a
I know.
cloaking. I don't know, like they projected there from some teleport machine. But they also talk about these people having some type of telepathic powers. Because sometimes they'll be communicating with the person, but their mouth's not even moving, but they hear them. How like you hear them, but they're not speaking. And a lot of people have talked about that happening. But I mean, I don't know. It just, who are these? They seem to come in. They say they're some form of government agent, but they don't have any
Yeah.
proper credentials that prove that, because if they claim you're from the FBI or claim you're a police officer, you're supposed to show your credentials, but they don't ever have that. They don't have any
Yeah,
of
but
that.
one of the things that has been consistent too is when they show the credentials, it's usually just a card with a symbol on it that says secret, and they like flash it. They put it away really quick before you, and they do the same with their badges before you can really examine them.
Yeah, there's this. I think even one of them they were talking about. They said that they've claimed they were from the Third Eye government, Third Eye agency, Third Eye government, some type of
Yeah,
intelligence thing. I'm like, what the hell's the Third Eye Nation?
yeah, really.
Or I don't know if they're government agents or time travelers or supernatural. Because some of the cases when you're reading about them, they appear out of nowhere and disappear right after, like right in front of the person's eyes.
Yeah.
Where other rooms they've got these vehicles and they look the people look plastic. That would creep me out the most. I don't know if I could deal with somebody who looks like they're plastic, because how do you wrap your
I
mind
hear
around
you.
that? And then for them to
I
fade out on
know.
energy, it's just strange.
I know. So, who are these men in
No,
black?
well, wait, I don't know. I mean, I'm not done yet. I had one more thought first I want to say, but there's people
Okay.
who talk about, because it's only 9:30, but there's people who talk about these men in black and these women in black that they think it's kind of like supernatural in effect, because they think that they come around and that they intimidate these people for a reason, because they want to feed off of the energy from those that they have in contact with, simply because they're provoking fear. Like they feed off the fear. It gives them energy. There's people who are discussing like that. And there's also people who think that the same with dogmens too, and Bigfoots. They think that they feed on energy as well, and people's energy, and
Maybe they
the
do.
dogman provokes fear on purpose because he's feeding on that energy. Not only is he, I'm not saying we're saying this. This is what people are saying about out in the world when it comes to men in black and women in black and stuff. But they think that they feed off the energy of humans in order for whatever. I don't even know why. But there are even people who believe that these men in black have actually knocked off some people who got way too close to the truth because they wanted to silence them completely. See, now here's the thing. I don't think everybody's encounter with the men in black, I don't think that they're all the same, because I think some of them do work for our government. They do work for our Air Force, because people are getting a little too close to our own secrets, and they have to protect our government stuff. I understand that, right? But then there's other stuff that doesn't make any sense, and it's really weird, and that's the ones that freak me out.
Yeah.
But we do know that there's people who have died that have connections with the government, and the government have taken people. I mean, our presidents have died, for getting too involved into things they shouldn't be looking into, or wanting to speak too openly about things they're not supposed to be speaking about.
Right. Right. And I do believe that too. I mean, our government's not completely innocent, or they'd be in another line of work. But it's
Sorry for coughing.
But what is the sense? Millions of people are seeing these things.
No, I don't know about million, but several
I'm not
thousand.
talking about the men in black. I'm talking about these other things.
Right.
Millions of people are seeing these things. Why are they trying to hide it? I mean, who are these men in black? Are they a secret government agency? I don't know.
Yeah.
Are they alien hybrids? I don't know. Some people believe that they are.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the purpose of their scare tactics? Because there's never been a report of them following through that we know of.
Right.
Exactly.
Because the person might already be dead. That's, dead people don't talk. So,
exactly.
But, here's another thing, because when I was looking into this and I found out that they started harassing people that had to do with cryptids and everything else, but, there's people who are wanting to look into the Dogman stuff. They know there's tons of sightings in certain areas that have to do with National Park Service, national parks and stuff. They call the national parks and say, hey, we want to go out here, do a little investigation, try to do this stuff. They're like, okay, but we want to stick you way in this one spot where you can't get no service or everything else. You're going to be on your own. And they're there's people who are being intimidated even through the National Park Service, because, there's tons of people who are getting missing and disappearing. And a lot of people...
Well, there's their mistake right there, because that's where the UFOs show up at, is out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, they say that these national state parks and lands and stuff are actually protected to protect the underground bases that have to do with the aliens and stuff. Or, there's a lot of weird cryptids out there that there's so much to... we did a show on that too. I forgot when it was, while ago. But we're going to do more shows on Missing 411 in the National Park Service. But when we were digging into that, we thought it was strange because they had records about who used this potty house, who swam in this pool, who did all this stuff. But they had no records of the amount of missing people or who was missing there or nothing. Exactly. There was so much odd stuff. But they also talk about there being strange stairways in the middle of the woods that... some say...
went nowhere.
No, but if you go climb them, they're kind of like those Stargate things or whatever the heck they called them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, there's just... When I was reading all this stuff, it started making me think of all these different things that we talked about and how everything kind of ties into everything in some really bizarre way, Even with the vile vortices and stuff. There's so many people and so many things that are connected. It's so strange. It kind of blows your mind a little bit.
And why are they trying to destroy as much information about ETs as well as cryptids as they possibly can? I mean, what purpose can that possibly serve? Because like I said, there are literally millions of people that have seen UFOs and
other things,
and stuff like that.
What are you laughing about?
I just saw something.
In Chad?
Remember the lights over Phoenix, Arizona in 1977? Literally hundreds of thousands of people saw those lights and taped them. But the government insists they were flares. And that's probably because it was too dark to say they were weather balloons like they did for the Roswell, New Mexico crash. And if you think about it, there really is not a whole lot of difference between the real Men in Black and the MIB movies. It's just that their tactics are different. And it should also be noted, too, that more people do not believe in MIBs than those that do. And out of those people that do not believe in MIBs, they do believe in UFOs.
Yeah, there's some who believe in the UFOs.
And there are some that don't believe in UFOs that do believe in MIBs.
Right. So it's or some
but
believe
they don't believe that they're connected.
Right. But that's the great thing about the world. Everybody has, here's the thing. We all subscribe to our own truths. You know what I mean? You have your truths, I have my truths, and then there are the truths. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And there are things out there that are hard for us to believe in, but they're there. Just because I haven't seen everything doesn't mean that I don't believe you or so-and-so had their experiences, because they are happening. And even if somebody did have the proper proof and had everything to prove to you, this Dogman's real, this Bigfoot's real, this alien's real, the government's doing this, you really think they're going to be able to put that out there? Like, I think if things are being controlled, like you said, then they are going to intimidate you and take your
it's easier to do it with Bigfoot and Wolfman or Dogman, because really those two creatures, even though people see them,
tons of people,
they're kind of hard to find.
Yeah, but you know what?
Most of those sightings are by accident.
But I go in the woods, and we have large land up north, and I know we have bear and moose and deer and lynx and all these other things, but I don't see all those animals in the woods. I know they're out there, but you go in the woods, you ain't going to see hardly anything unless you run up into it, and I don't want to run up into a bear. I don't want to run up into a lynx. You know what I mean?
Well, even with a bear or a wolf, a lot of times even those encounters are by accident.
They are, but the thing is, even if, let's say, somebody does have proof and they do get to show it, not everybody's going to believe it anyway, just because of how so many people have faked everything. So even if you do have a picture of a spirit, or you do have a picture of a Bigfoot, or you do have a picture of this or that or whatever, most people aren't going to believe it anyway because of how technology is. You can create anything nowadays. So nobody's really going to believe it, even if you are showing them the real stuff. And then you are going to get the people out there who do believe in it. But that's the problem with today. Even if we did have the evidence, most people aren't going to believe us anyway, just because of all the technology and all the fake stuff that's going about. It's almost like you have to take everybody out on a bus, throw them out in the field, and then whistle for the dogman to come out and be like, here you go. You know, a couple people might get ripped up by it, but it still happens. That sucks. But I'm just saying, there's no way we can prove. We'll never be able to make a disbeliever into a believer, and you're never going to really change a believer into somebody who's going to admit that everything's fake. So we live into such an interesting world. We're not saying we're not saying we don't know, or if these stories that we shared tonight are real or not. But we tried our best for you, the viewer who requested this. So I hope that we did good enough job for y'all. But.
Yeah. Oh, and before I get my thought, I mentioned that there are those that do not believe in UFOs but do believe that MIBs exist. But a lot of those think that the MIBs are some sort of spy ring connected to our government and are keeping an eye on those people suspected of being spies for other governments or even unpatriotic.
Yeah.
Like it's just another way to control the people through intimidations. Mm-hmm. But do MIBs really exist? There are too many reports out there to completely dismiss it. And Raven and I do not know what they are or even if these MIBs do exist. All we can do is do our research, tell you what we find, just do our best to share with all of you some information that we ran across on the net pertaining to these strange encounters, and we leave it up to you to decide.
Yeah. I just want to say that I just found this to be very interesting, what we did tonight, because it really drug me to a lot of different things I already kind of looked into before, but it's definitely given me many other different ideas for upcoming show topics. But Spooky, I know we're going to end it a little early tonight, guys, but my throat's a little hurting. But Spooky, why don't you let everybody know what we're going to do on our next show?
Okay. I want to thank everybody that came in to listen to us, that tuned in to listen, and everybody that came in to chat. I want to thank our mods for doing a good job. I want to thank Raven for a good show, and I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. It's in 2 days.
For those who celebrate it, there's other people who are from other countries too. We hope you just have a great Thursday yourself. But why don't you tell what we're going to do next?
Join us December 6th, 2016, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, when we will discuss another viewer's request, Nephilim giants.
The giants.
I knew I was going to mess up that word. Did they exist? Hidden history, real or fake? Tune in Tuesday and decide for yourself. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. Don't forget to share us on Facebook, YouTube, or any other social media you happen to be a member of.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for coming, for always hanging out with us, for the awesome banter that's in the chat when we're live, because we learn a lot too from, reading what y'all can. We can't catch everything, but we try our best when we are. Me and Spooky are still doing every other week till a little bit for a while, just to catch up and get healthy and stuff. But I just want to say thanks everybody for sharing us with others. We'll see you at our other show on December 6th. If you want to get show reminders, you can either click on the cogwheel here on YouTube next to our Spooky and Raven name, or you can go to our website at anythingbutordinary2.wix.com/anythingbutordinary, and you can sign up for weekly email reminders, or you can actually get in contact with us there just to talk with us, or even, make show suggestions. But, thanks everybody, and we will see you next time, and everybody have a safe week.